Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and in our last video we upgraded our quest scriptable object so that it now has objectives. We can add objectives for items, for NPCs we need to talk to, and locations to visit. We can keep track of a required and current amount, and we can even click in order to print to our console what the objectives are. That said, we have no way to track these quests. Now, this is going to be one of the most complex coding videos in this series, so please bear with me. That said, we'll move slow and make sure to explain each concept as we go and hopefully learn a few things along the way. So, tracking objectives. That's where we're headed in this video. Let's get started. So first things first, if we want to display our tracking on objectives, we're going to have to add that to our UI. So let's head into Quest Log UI. And to begin with, I'm just going to add a little decoration here. I don't like the fact that my quest title shows up looking the exact same as all the objectives. I'm just going to add some little equal signs on either side to make it prettier. I'm also going to come down here to our objectives, and right now one thing we could do is make it so that it shows the description of the objective, so say collect 3 mushrooms, and then I'm just going to put an arrow here. You can put whatever you want, and we're going to now display our objectives current amount. Now this works pretty well. We can go ahead and play the game, hit play, and we get a readout of our current progress on each of these. I can then go into the scriptable object, change our current amounts, print it, and voila, it is in fact printing those new numbers. However, there's a problem. If I were to leave the game and then come back in and hit play, you'll notice that as soon as I start, we still have those old values. It doesn't reset. That's simply because scriptable objects are not runtime data. They're stored in our assets folder, and so they don't reset on playthroughs. So we need to find a better way to store this data. So first off, let's just go in our quest SO where we will remove the current amount, as we'll have to store that elsewhere. Now that will create an error for the moment, but don't worry. We're going to go ahead and create a new C# script, which we'll call Quest Manager. And this is where we're actually going to handle tracking our progress for these different quests. Now before we get into that manager, let's just get rid of this error by heading into our Quest Log UI, and we'll just comment out that latter part. We'll bring that back in a little bit. Now that there's no errors, we can go to our quest canvas and it'll now allow us to add a component. Let's put our quest manager right here. So what we want to do here is make it so that when we click on a slot, it notifies our quest log UI, which will handle all of the user interface. But the quest log UI needs to get data about the current progress of the quest. To do that, it's going to need to talk to the quest manager. So here now we can come down and fix our debug log so that it goes to the quest manager, and it's going to talk to a method we've not created yet called getProgressText, and let's go ahead and pass along this quest scriptable object so it knows which quest it needs to provide progress for. Now our quest manager is going to need to be able to track each of our quests and the objectives within them. To do that, let's begin by getting rid of the start and update methods. Now we're going to make a dictionary, and this is where things get a little complex because this is going to be a dictionary of dictionaries. So we'll start with the key, which will just be each of the quest scriptable objects that we currently have as quests. But then paired with each quest, we're going to have a dictionary that's going to hold all of their objectives, as well as the current progress in those objectives. Now, this super dictionary is going to be something we'll call quest progress, and we're just going to initialize it as an empty dictionary to start. Now we're going to create a method that will give us a message which will update us on the progress. This is what will appear in our debug log. So here it's going to be a string that it returns. We'll call it getProgressText, and it's going to take in a quest scriptable object so it knows what update to provide us with. So at first we're going to assume that our current progress is 0 in each case. To do this, we'll make an integer called current amount and just set it to 0. Later on, we'll find a way to actually calculate the true amount, but we don't have that yet, so we'll just start with a 0. Now at this point, we know which quest we're looking at, but not which specific objective we're giving a report about. So let's head back to our quest log UI where we request this information. You can see here that we passed the scriptable object. Let's also pass the objective. So now when we go through this loop, for every objective, we'll pass the quest as well as the objective along so that we can get a full report. Now we'll make it so our getProgressText method can actually receive that information by adding a quest objective parameter. And now we'll create a series of possible messages that we could spit out. The first will be if the current amount is greater than or equal to the objective's required amount. If that's the case, we've finished the objective and we can just return the message complete. But what if we're collecting items and we don't yet have all of them? Well, let's make an else-if statement to handle this situation. So if our objective's target item is not null, meaning if the target is actually an item, then we want to return the current amount versus the required amount. So we'll create a debug log that will return that information. Now, the only other possibilities are that it's a location or an actor and we haven't yet found or talked to them, in which case we'll just print that this objective is still in progress. Now we just need to go to our quest log and make sure that it knows where to find the quest manager. There we go. Let's give this a shot. Now when we get in the game, we can click on our slot and we actually get a full progress report. The only problem is that we're not actually tracking anything, so everything is always going to appear in progress or return a 0 out of required amount. So now that we have the ability to print our progress, we actually want to make sure that we're tracking it first. So we'll come into our quest log UI, and right before we print our progress, let's tell the quest manager that we want to update our objective progress, and we'll pass along the scriptable object as well as the specific objective we want to update. Now in our quest manager, we need to create that method. So this is just a public void one called update objective progress. And we want to make sure that it's ready to take in a scriptable object as well as an objective. So the first thing we'll do in here is check our super dictionary, quest progress, to see if it already contains the scriptable object we're looking for. Now if it does not already have it, then we want to make a new entry. So we'll just tell quest progress, and here we'll pass the quest SO that we're currently looking for, and we're just going to make that a new dictionary entry within the super dictionary. Now we're just going to create a local variable to hold that mini dictionary. We'll call this progress dictionary, and it's just going to be equal to the quest progress dictionary that we just created. So essentially we're just holding it here in memory so that we can play with it a little bit. Now that we've got the entry, we need to actually give it an amount. We're going to default this to 0, as that's what everything will start at. And essentially we're going to go through a series of checks that try to see if that number needs to change. So first of all, if the objective is a item objective, we want to make sure that the new amount is set to, and here we're going to need to ask our inventory manager how many of that item we already have. We're going to do this with a new method called getItemQuantity that just passes along the target item we're looking for. Now, in case you're just joining us for this series or have a different inventory you're using, I'm just going to scroll slowly here so you can kind of see what we're working with in our inventory manager. Now, we already have a hasItem method, which lets us know if we have a specific item, but we don't have any way to check the current quantity of an item, so that's what we're going to do here. This public method will return an integer. We'll call it getItemQuantity, and it's just going to take in the item SO that we're looking for. We'll start with the value of 0 and then check to see if that number needs to change. So for each slot in our inventory slots array, we're just going to check to see if that slot contains the item we're looking for. If it does, we'll take its quantity and add it to our total. That way, if we have mushrooms in 2 different slots, it'll find the first one, add that to our total, but continue to loop through the slots, adding any additional slots with mushrooms to our total. At the end, it will return the grand total of, say, mushrooms. So now we've handled the possibility if our target is an item, but what if it is a location? Well, in that case, our else if statement gets a little more complex. We need to see, first of all, if the objective is in fact a location one, and if so, we need to talk to our game manager's location history tracker, which we created during our NPC series. For those of you who may not have seen that, or if it's been a while, let's take a look at that script. Here you can see our location history tracker just keeps a hash set of all the locations we visited, and we can use this has visited to find out, true or false, whether we've been to a specific location. So then, if the objective's target is a location, and our history tracker says we have visited that location, the new amount will just be filled up to whatever the required amount is, which generally speaking will just be a 1. Finally, we'll do pretty much the exact same thing, but for our NPCs. So if the objective's target is an NPC one, we'll talk to our game manager to find our dialogue history tracker, and if we've spoken to that NPC, we'll make our new amount equal to the required amount. And for reference, this is our dialogue history tracker, which also keeps a hash set and then has this has spoken to method to let us know if we've spoken to specific NPCs or not. Now at this point, one way or another, new amount will either be a 0 or we will have filled it through one of our if statements here. And so now we can get the mini dictionary we created above, find the specific objective we're looking for, and set its progress as that new amount. Now the last thing we're going to do is make it so that this current amount down here does not always default to 0. Now in order to get the correct amount, we're just going to create a helper method here. This will be a public integer, as it'll return a number, called getCurrentAmount, and it will just take in the quest we're looking at, as well as the specific objective we want progress on. Here we'll just make an if statement, and we'll look at the super dictionary quest progress and try to get a value. Try get value is handy because if it can't find the value, you won't get an error, but if it does, it'll just spit that value out. So first, we'll ask the super dictionary if it has any entries for this quest specifically, and if it does, it will spit out that mini dictionary. Now, if we do find that mini dictionary, we'll repeat the process, checking if that mini dictionary has a value. This time we'll pass in the objective we're looking for, and if that objective exists, it will pass out the amount of progress. If that search was successful, we will return the amount we found for that objective. If, however, either of these fails, we'll just return a 0 as either the quest didn't exist or that objective had no value. Now at last we can replace current amount equals 0 with current amount equals get current amount, and of course pass in the quest and objective we want the information for. Now I realize that one was a whole lot of code. However, we have a now very elegant system that we can try out. When I click on the slot, I get my printout showing I've made no progress. However, I can go visit the Green Hills. I can, the quest log's a little in the way, but I can talk to Blue Bob over here. And now I get an accurate printout. I still need the mushrooms, but my other objectives are complete. I could now just go into my items here. I'm just gonna click on Scene View. I'm going to duplicate this item and turn it into a mushroom. Now when I get back in the game, I can collect those mushrooms, click on my slot, and lo and behold, it's updating. Alright, we don't have any rewards yet, and to be honest, it'd be really nice to display this information in some slick UI instead of a debug log. That's where we're heading in the next video. Hope to see you in that one. But until that time, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.